Hi everyone, welcome back to Project No Buy. Today's video is going to be hopefully a quick one. It's a little rapid fire of the lies I used to believe that kept me in the clutches of consumerism, or consumed by consumerism. This is not a comprehensive video. This is just some of the major lies that I used to believe. I've unpacked some of these in previous videos, like the consumerist propaganda, capitalist propaganda, etc. But I'm just doing a little bit of a recap, a quick unpacking and repacking perhaps of what I used to believe and what I now believe. So the first thing that I used to believe that led to consuming is that I'm poor. And this was kind of a scarcity mindset thing, I guess, where I could express security and safety through having stuff, having more rather than less, never getting rid of anything, hoarding, all those kind of tendencies. And there's some degree of truth in not necessarily that I'm poor, because at this time of life, we are able to make enough money to cover our needs. And so that's what I would consider not poor. And everybody living paycheck to paycheck, I think, again, a lot of that's by design in terms of we need to be able to keep people working to survive. And if people were not living paycheck to paycheck, then there would be less incentive for people to keep on working. If people could save up and retire early and etc. If more people could do that, more people probably would. But what I mean in this sentiment of, feeling like I'm poor, feeling like I have to pursue security through stuff, feeling like working paycheck to paycheck is a struggle, when in reality, it could just be life. It could just be a regular feature of life. And again, I have reached a point of being privileged enough to say this, in that I don't hate my job, or I don't feel completely demoralized and downtrodden at my job. I have a job that I consider livable, or I have ways to deal with it at the times that I feel like it's not livable. And so, that's a very privileged position to be in. I acknowledge that. And I think it is something to, I guess, strive for, not in the way that I'm telling you to strive for it, but for myself in terms of where I want to be with life. I want to always be able to have ways to cope with having to work. And again, that's not like, oh, I have to work, like, oh, I'm a princess, I shouldn't have to. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are unpleasant aspects of every job. In fact, there's a point in the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which I kind of disparaged in a previous video. I said it was not something I was vibing with. But I take it all back. I got over the differences in our delivery style. I think I said she was a little too boss babe for me, but you know what? I got over it. And there is a story about how somebody, I think it was Mark Manson, whose book I also did not finish, except I really didn't finish it, and our walks of life were perhaps too different to actually reconcile. But anyway, she shared this story about how he says something about how he wrote a blog post about how you just have to choose the type of sandwich that you're okay with. Choose your favorite flavor, I guess, is what he said. The meaning of that is that you choose the crap you're willing to put up with, I guess, in terms of the job you have to do. And there's going to be a downside to every single job. You just have to choose the one that you can deal with, in other words. And it's kind of like flipping the aspirational approach on its head, in terms of there's pursuing your dream job, trying to find a job you like, and then there's trying to find a job that you can manage to do, or that you don't hate enough to not want to live anymore, or whatever it may be. And so, there was that kind of recontextualizing that helped me articulate this point, I guess, in this video. So there we are. The other thing about this lie about I'm poor, or I'm struggling, or there were times in my life that I was actually struggling and had to really, really budget to make sure I could keep on buying food. And I've been on food stamps before, so I'm not trying to say that that's invalid, right? I'm not trying to dismiss that in this way of speaking, or I'm not trying to totally convey that I've left that plane of existence. But I think the other nuance there that I have picked up is that people are made to feel like they're struggling or like they're poor by the comparison trap, right? I think, again, there's multiple realities here. When I was working at Panera at 5 a.m., 35 hours a week or whatever for $9 an hour, it's not necessarily the same as me now, not working for $9 an hour, not working, maybe I'm working 20 to 30 hours a week, but I feel much more fulfilled in what I do. And I understand that these are two different planes of existence, and that the comparison trap is much more demoralizing. It hurts more to the me that was working at Panera. And, that comparison, the indignity of that, I guess, was real and not perceived. And I have, I guess, increased my station in life, or, just lived a little more and matured into a job that isn't demoralizing like that one in various ways. I'm not saying it's demoralizing to work in fast food or anything like that, but I'm just saying that that was not my life's aspiration, and I wasn't handling it well mentally. I wasn't approaching it constructively. But back in those days, the comparison trap was more real to me then, in terms of even somebody working as a full-time teacher was a positive comparison. Even somebody working as a full-time janitor, and anyone who had job security and maybe some modicum of control over their hours, which not everybody does. Teachers and janitors don't, and there's many different aspects of it, right? But my point is, there is the comparison trap at every single level. And so you could feel poor no matter where you are, no matter how much you make, no matter how secure you are, no matter how you're living. And so I was maybe holding on to that narrative, or holding on to that old, like that old pair of pants, right? When I was actually more poor, and felt that way, and just kind of translated those feelings. And it's not like I want to engage in lifestyle creep in terms of consuming, but I do want to engage in it in terms of my emotional response, right? In a way, like I don't want to operate as if I feel poor all the time and have that scarcity mindset, have that comparison FOMO. And again, maybe feeling poor means something different to you, or maybe acting like you're poor means something different, means maybe you save a lot more money, or, it doesn't mean that you feel helpless and aspirational of people who have more, or people who have nicer things, or people who curate their lives and, the fewer better things, the aspirational wealthy minimalism and that kind of thing that I fell into in terms of things that I saw and I wanted and felt like were out of reach. And so if it doesn't apply to you, then leave it. But for me, that's one of the lies that I was believing or telling myself that kept me in the cycle of wanting to upgrade, wanting to consume, seeing the comparisons, and wanting to get to the next level. And I don't care about what level I'm on now, and nor do I care about getting to whatever the next level might be. And I have removed myself from that cycle of comparisons, I guess, in a way, both through lack of exposure, but also through lack of caring about it, lack of wanting to compare myself through those frames of reference.
And I think this is the kind of freedom that financial people talk about when they say they're able to buy security through having a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And so, it doesn't have to manifest through making a lot more money. It can also manifest through having a financial safety net where you no longer have to feel poor.
I guess on that point, the next lie I used to believe was that I can fix my own consumerism with more consumerism. So by buying the right stuff and making the right choices. And I know I just kind of talked about this in a video recently about how I have found some local options that actually make me feel good about buying there. But what was not a part of that story is I'm not going there just to shop. I'm not going there just to buy something. I'm not going there to engage in consumerism. I'm going there to replace something I need, or to have an option that's local for an alternative that I could get not locally or at a big corporation. And so engaging in consumerism for the sake of it is not the answer. Even changing to the more sustainable options in some cases is not the answer. It's definitely not the case if you can still use what you have. And in some cases, it's not going to be an answer that solves the aspects you want to solve. Like the Wild deodorant is an example. It was supposed to be a small sustainable company, and now it's owned by a large corporation. And so part of the aspects for why to switch to that brand are now no longer a part of that brand. And this can happen to anything. So really, the only way to fix your consumerism is to not overindulge in it, to not overconsume, to not buy things you don't need. And again, overconsume can mean multiple things. It can mean having 20 different things, or it can mean buying one thing that you really didn't need. And the meaning of the word is different in both circumstances, right? If you overconsume by having 100 candles or whatever, that's one area of overconsumption. And then to overconsume by buying something you actually didn't need, that's maybe a smaller scale aspect of it. But I'm still I hope you're with me in terms of understanding what I mean by this. It's not that overconsumption to buy one thing you didn't need, but it can still be a form of consuming that you didn't want to do. And so it's over what you actually needed to do. And I'm not demonizing that kind of overconsumption. I would classify that as a mistake. And, 100 candles is maybe repeated mistakes. And so it's kind of a different area of attack, or kind of adjustment that needs to happen in these kind of behavior patterns. The other kind of lie that I'm still grappling with is that companies have the ability to do anything other than what's best for their bottom lines, their profits. So I've been entrapped in this for a long time now, where there's ideas, lofty ideas perhaps, that companies have the ability to do better, or that they have incentive to operate in a different way. They shouldn't be rage baiting. They should be more sustainable. And these things are true. However, are they going to be able to do that if it doesn't impact their profits in a positive way, right? If the rage bait ad is going to get them more attention and therefore put them into more minds, and even if some people will boycott and successfully do so, other people will now be awakened to this company, and even if they don't agree with what the company is sharing, they may be intrigued to try the company's products, right? It's exposure, it's awareness. And so I am sure some of the latest controversial ads, the Cracker Barrel, the Sydney Sweeney, the things that I haven't even mentioned that I'm not going to give airtime to, because now I realize that that airtime is feeding into what they want, and I don't want to feed into what they want anymore. I've already mentioned those, I think, so that's why I'm not, I'm not going to censor myself in those previous videos or today. But I'm not going to do that anymore, because ultimately it is playing into their game. And, having a more sustainable option is only going to be to target more consumers who will buy if there's a sustainable option. And so the wool has been removed from my eyes as far as companies even being capable of having altruistic motivations. And perhaps with a small locally run business, or, local to you, wherever it might be, it doesn't have to be local to have these intentions necessarily, but it's more likely that you will find these intentions as core values when the businesses are smaller and have more, retain more creative control or active control over all of the processes that happen. And I guess, these are the businesses to prioritize. But the lie that I had to unlearn was that companies, as a blanket statement, right, any business, any large corporation, had the ability to change their behavior for the better. Because ultimately, we live in a system that kind of disables them from doing that. If they're not working for their shareholders' profits, or whatever economic term here, then they're going to fail. And that is a systemic issue. So this lie, this conception I had that companies can do better, well, yes, they can, but they can't. Their hands are tied. Without regulation, that means that they will do better, that they are motivated to do better, that they will not suffer in terms of their success and positions in the markets, in kind of taking these measures to be better for the realities of our existence on this planet. Basically, decreasing pollution has to be profitable in order for it to be something that gets prioritized, with the system being the way that it is. Having more sustainable products and less exploitation has to become profitable in order for it to actually become a thing. And I maybe understand that now, or I understand more of it now than I used to. That kind of brings me to another little bonus lie kind of on this point that I used to believe about how where something is made dictates the quality of it, and specifically how American-made products equal higher quality. And I'm not saying that this is not true. And like I've just said in previous points, that locally made things do tend to at least have a chance at being closer to our own standards of quality. But it's something that affects industries across the board, this deterioration of quality. I saw this video by Austin Williams recently that really, really hit home for me and kind of articulated all of this in a way that I really liked. I'll have it linked up here or share it. I might have already shared it on this channel. But basically, planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence are kind of the status quo. And so no matter where something is made, they have to kind of play this game in order to even have a chance in having a place of value in the economy. And again, I'm not an economist. I don't understand the ins and outs of all these things. And a lot of people will say consumers make the choices. I mean, again, Austin in his video explained why that's not true. And he said it a lot better than I could. So go watch that if you are somebody who believes that consumers make the choice of the quality of products. But yeah, I've had a lot to think about with especially that notion of perceived obsolescence, and how that really is what it is. Trends are perceived obsolescence. New seasonal goods are perceived obsolescence of the old ones. And it's just a really great way to contextualize it in terms of why we should fight it. Planned obsolescence was easy for me to see as a bad thing, and I'm not going to upgrade my phone just because you say I should. I'm going to try to keep the one I have working for as long as humanly possible to defeat the planned obsolescence. Now, with the perceived obsolescence, I'm much more determined to hang on to my old style of things, not upgrade the clothing that still works perfectly fine because of the perceived obsolescence that you're trying to serve to me, no. Anyway, the last lie I have here, for today's video anyway, is that we can fix a problem related to either being unique or fitting in, basically how we want to be perceived, but in these particular terms, with something available for purchase. Now, I have talked about this in various forms, how we can't really control how we're perceived based on the stuff we have or the stuff we show or what we choose to use. But this, I guess, gets at that deeper issue of human psychology, of how we both want to be unique and noticeable, stand out in a positive way, and we want to fit in. There's some safety and security there. And both of those aspects of humanity are put up for purchase so much of the time. Each good that we see advertised is probably in one of these categories, or advertised to prey on one of these two human impulses, right? Be cool, stand out, be the it girl with this product, be the one that everybody wants to be, that everybody wants to copy with this thing, stand out positively, be noticed, be good in your field, the top of your field, whatever it is. Or, here's the safety and security. Everybody with taste chooses this. Fit in with these shoes, fit in with this group in particular, I guess, but which is maybe a form of being distinctive and noticed, but you get the difference here, right? Like, be unique and the best with this product, above the rest or different from the rest. Be not like other girls or whatever, and be safe. Be part of the masses, but in a good way. Like, everybody has this, so therefore you need this. And, not many people would say being part of the masses is maybe a positive attribute, but when framed in that way of like, oh, everybody's got this, you've got to have this too, you would be left out if you didn't have the Stanley or the Owala or whatever mass-produced, the Labubus or whatever, and you don't want to be left out. You don't want to be the only one without this thing. And so, I guess take that exercise out in your experience of advertising and influencing. You can ask yourself, is this a buying it to fit in or buying it to stand out? And is it going to work? Is it possible if I get this product? Is it going to actually change anything about my human experience if I have and use and display and show and consciously show preference for this product, consciously present this product alongside my being or as part of my being, if it's, makeup or clothing that I show on my body? Is it going to make a difference to my lived experience on that spectrum of being unique and or fitting in? And is it worth it? And is it practical? Is it serving any other needs other than that spectrum, placing yourself on that continuum? And how so? I do think that there are things that are needs in our lives that will also be associated with one of these things, right? And I guess the utilitarian things will probably inevitably be more about fitting in and maybe not be marketed as such per se. Like, everybody during winter is probably going to have a winter coat. And, it's not because you want to fit in that you have a winter coat, it's because it's cold outside. And so there was obviously levels of nuance, different levels of nuance too, the obvious nuance and the less obvious nuance. But I'll leave that for you to think about and discuss, and perhaps share some examples of in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on that kind of dichotomy between being unique and striking and noticeable and kind of, wow, that's an aspirational example, versus being safe and secure and not targeted and approachable, I guess. The wow, they look like the girl next door kind of example, or whatever kind of example that you could put there. The everyman, the positive thing we want to emulate because of these other reasons. And how really you can't buy your way into either one of those things. All right, I feel like that was a little bit of a hodgepodge for today, but I will wrap it up there. So we had, I think, 4 big ideas. The lies that I used to believe. Firstly, that I'm poor or with that scarcity mindset. Secondly, that I could fix consumerism with more consumerism. Thirdly, that companies have any ability to do anything other than what's best for their profits, even if it's human lives and interests at stake. And lastly, that we can fix a problem related to being unique and standing out, or being safe and fitting in with a purchase. Bonus points for quality discussions and planned and perceived obsolescence. All right, with that, I will wrap it up there for today, and I will say bye for now, and see you in the next one.